Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Committee on Economic and Community Development. In attendance, we have members of the committee, myself, Sharon Green Middleton, Chair of the Committee, Vice President of the Council, and Representative of the 6th District. We also have Robert Stokes, member of the committee and 12th District. Robert. We also have Councilman John Bullock, member of the committee and representative of the 9th District.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. And we also have Councilmember Ryan Dorsey, member of the committee and representative of the 3rd District.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
We also have member of the committee, Mark Conway, Councilman Mark Conway, and representative of the 4th District.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
And we also have Councilman Antonio Glover, member of the committee and representative of the 13th District.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
And we also have Councilwoman Odette Ramos, member of the committee and representative of the 14th District. Are you here, Councilwoman? Well, I don't see her yet, so we'll wait till she comes. We won't have to wait, but I'll recognize her when she gets on. And just checking to see if we have any other additional council members that have joined, and I don't see any. But we do have members of the Office of the President, and the first one is Nikki Thompson.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
You're welcome. And we also have a member of the Office of the President, Matt Stegman.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
And then I also see member of the Office of the President, Aaron DeGraffenreid.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
And representing the Mayor's Office, we have Natasha Mihu.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
You're welcome. And we also have Nina Themulis.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
And then, of course, we have various members of the agencies that we'll go over in a minute. This afternoon, the committee will have a hearing for Bill number 21-0004, which is the Office to End Homelessness, Establishment, Administration, and Permanent Housing Voucher Program. For the purpose of establishing the Baltimore City Office to End Homelessness, declaring that the policy of the Mayor and City Council of Baltimore to make homelessness rare, brief, and non-recurring is the main purpose of this hearing today. The bill was introduced on January 11th, 2021. The bill was sponsored by Councilmember Ryan Dorsey. We'll hear comments from the sponsor, and then we also we'll be having the state's attorney, Mosby, make comments as well, and she will speak after the sponsor due to her very busy schedule. We also have a long list of witnesses that want to have testimony, and a number of them have already sent in or emailed their written testimony, but we do have some that want to speak, and we want to make sure that they do speak, so we're going to limit the time for attendees just 2 minutes, because if you feel when I get to you, if it's just repeating what someone else said, and you'd rather just go ahead and pass, please do that. But we have a long list here, and we want to just keep it to 2 minutes. So at this point, we're going to start with the sponsor of the bill, Councilmember Ryan Dorsey.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you to all of our committee members and to all of our agency representatives, those in attendance from home. And thank you, Madam State's Attorney, for being with us to testify in support of this bill today. Really appreciate that. I want to take as little time as possible, but to try to be as thoroughly as possible as I can, and kind of giving the overview of what this bill is and why it's necessary. Because it's multifaceted and it is seriously needed. The first part of this bill simply establishes an office, much like one that already exists, but which over time has had certain impermanence to it. The Mayor's Office of Homeless Services over the years has existed within the Housing Department, within the Health Department, within the Mayor's Office as something of its own, or elsewhere situated under something else inside of the Mayor's Office. And it's taken many forms and lacked a certain continuity of mission and leadership, administration after administration, and over time, I think many feel has not been able to perform to the highest level of need with respect to the severity of the challenges of homelessness that Baltimore City faces at any given time. And given the severity and the needs related to homelessness, I think that it's reasonable to say that we should respect it enough to have a permanent place for it in our city's government. And therefore, it makes a lot of sense to just have an office that is codified as permanent, because as unfortunate as it is, homelessness does not seem like it's going away, anytime too soon. And if it does, we can always repeal the existence of this office if for some reason it's not needed. So to create an office, one of the other great benefits that comes with it is the opportunity to create a director position who is not merely appointed, but has the greater accountability of being somebody who is nominated by the mayor and confirmed by the city council, establishing that relationship of accountability and teamwork that comes with agencies having to come before the city council in a way that the mayor's office is a little different from that. And so, there are some basic reasons related to good governance that I think kind of make the case for itself as to why we should codify this office, in addition to the ability to simply write into law that there is a certain mission and certain standards to which the office should be held, like adherence to best practices. Hopefully, we won't hear too much dispute today about whether or not we should permanently establish an office to address and end homelessness. The second part of this bill is to create a local funded voucher program, which the city does not have presently. There are a number of different voucher programs that are run in the city of Baltimore by various entities. Of course, Housing Authority of Baltimore City is perhaps the most notable and known one, administering the Federal Housing Choice Voucher Program, but we also have Baltimore Regional Housing Partnership, a nonprofit entity that administers also housing choice vouchers as a result of the Thompson v. HUD case. We also have providers who administer vouchers for permanent supportive housing. We rely on nonprofit partners like Healthcare for the Homeless to help write those checks every month to pay for rent for those enrolled in these programs. And so it's nothing new to have a voucher program, but what is distinct about this one is that it is part of a nationally recognized best practice known as moving on. This is recognized not only as an essential part of a pipeline for the most vulnerable to be able to move not only from the street or from shelters into permanent supportive housing programs where they can begin to get case management and wraparound services, but then to be able to continue in that pipeline into continued housing support once they no longer need the level of case management that they might need when they first entered into permanent supportive housing. So it helps to create a furtherance of this pipeline to more holistic wellness. This approach, this strategy, is now not only nationally recognized as a best practice, and I should also note specifically as an exceptionally wise use of constrained funding resources, but it is also now so mainstream that HUD itself is offering webinars on how to establish these programs and how to train local entities and others on how to establish these programs for the greatest effectiveness. And so I hope that interested folks will tune in to HUD's upcoming webinar on this on, I believe, March 17th. We seek to establish this voucher program, and to do so, we would ask this new office to administer it. And we look at the office as something that is essentially a sideways move, a lateral move of existing resources. We recognize that it takes whatever funding it takes right now to operate the Mayor's Office of Homeless Services. And if it is doing the work that it's supposed to be doing, we simply move these over into these same people over to doing the same job in a new office under a new name. It's a revenue neutral proposition. The voucher program, of course, needs to be funded somehow. While we don't have, as the City Council today at least, the ability to mandate the expenditure, we have an affordable housing trust fund whose advisory commission has prioritized the use of those resources and looks at about 1.3 million of the existing trust fund, which represents about 10% of the total trust fund going toward this voucher program. At that rate now, the finance department's report says one thing, but we also have a representative from Baltimore Regional Housing Partnership who actually administers a voucher program to say that it's much more feasible and cost effective than what the finance department's report says. I think it's reasonable to expect that this program can fund vouchers for about 80 households. That is individuals or families, and at the amount of funding that we believe is available through the Affordable Housing Trust Fund for this purpose. And that what that represents is something around 10% of those who are currently in the city's permanent supportive housing program being able to move on from that if they should choose to do so voluntarily. And let me be really clear about this, is that nobody would be forced out of permanent supportive housing into this new permanent housing voucher program. They would only do so under their own will and voluntarily. And I think that that is a step in the right direction. Would I love for us to be able to provide more vouchers to more people? Obviously, we have a significant problem of housing, of homelessness in the city. And I think it's only going to get worse in the very near future as the adverse impacts of COVID-19 continue to pour down on our city and its most vulnerable residents. And so with that, I say the time to act is now. and I look forward to the discussion and the rest of the hearing. I thank you, Madam Chair, for calling the hearing today, and to Madam State's Attorney for being here with us today. I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you. Good afternoon. I want to also thank Madam Chair as well as Bill's sponsor, Councilman Dorsey. Members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity to allow me to testify on this legislation that would create an office to end homelessness. Creation of this agency is long overdue and would be an important step towards recognizing that housing is a human right. In November, I testified in support of a bill to provide counsel to people in eviction cases. At the time, I was keen to address the question of what a state's attorney has to do with housing, and I will do it once again. As a top prosecutor in a city known for our violence, public safety and equal justice is paramount. But I think it's important to point out that there is an inextricable link between housing and public safety. When someone is homeless, they are more likely to commit crimes to alleviate their poverty. In fact, my office regularly sees individuals who have committed a crime not out of malice, but out of financial desperation. They steal to put food on their table. They break into abandoned buildings to have a warm place to sleep. They are people who deserve services, support, and above all, compassion. Living in a city where 28% of Baltimore's population lives in poverty, we must understand that socioeconomic inequality often leads to crimes of poverty that frequently has absolutely nothing to do with public safety, which is why my office, after consulting with public health experts nationally, declined to prosecute trespassing and drug possession, rogue and vagabond, and other offenses that disproportionately criminalize the poor, the homeless, and people of color in our city. The sad reality is that the criminal justice system can be a driver of homelessness. What we know to be true is that when someone is saddled with a criminal record, it can become very hard, if not impossible, to find housing. As such, individuals enter a vicious cycle. They commit a crime out of economic desperation, are subsequently arrested and convicted. Now they have a criminal record, serve their time in prison, and get out trying to rehabilitate and put their life back on track, only to be denied access to housing, employment, and other benefits as they try to reintegrate into society. Such barriers are a path to recidivism and more crime in our city, as those individuals are shut out of the regular society and turned back to the life that they know. The data has shown that those incarcerated are more than 13 times as likely to experience homelessness. If you are homeless, you are more likely to have interactions with law enforcement. Baltimore City data has shown that around 2,000 people experience homelessness each night. Against this backdrop, the creation of a dedicated, codified office to end homelessness is a logical approach. The city needs an agency dedicated to this important issue now more than ever in the midst of a global pandemic where we've seen city officials and many local nonprofits that have stepped up but have struggled to meet the basic housing needs of those most vulnerable and most susceptible to this virus. As the city's lead prosecutor, I have a responsibility to speak out in opposition to initiatives that will harm public safety and speak in favor of proposals that will enhance public safety. It is my firm belief that the passage of this bill would make our city safer, much more stable, and far more humane. I urge its passage. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam State's Attorney, for your comments. We definitely have your, or I think, did you submit your written comments to?
Yes, Madam Chair, I believe they did.
Thank you, appreciate that. And I'm sure this council, I can say that the council in general definitely understands your position. And I can also say that I think all of us are definitely in support of trying our best to help the homeless in the city. And as we move forward with this committee, and that will take us steps further in making a decision. So appreciate your support. Moving on to agency reports. I'm going to just kind of go down the list, and the representative of the agency, please basically state your name and talk about your report. We'll get through all the reports, and then we'll have council members on the committee to ask the agencies any questions that you have. But I'd rather get through all of the reports first. And we'll start with the law department that did come in with favorable comments. And who do we have representing the law department?
Madam Chair, it's Elena DePietro from the Law Department. The Law Department actually did have some comments and concerns about the bill, and we've met with the sponsor. So I just emailed to everyone a revised report along with a list of proposed amendments that solve the Law Department's concerns about the bill. And basically, we can then approve it with no reservations for form and legal sufficiency.
Could you talk about those amendments that
Sure.
you just submitted?
Sure. The first one has to do with let me then get to my report here.
While you're doing that, I do want to recognize Odette Ramos of the 14th District, which is also a member of the committee. And I do want to also recognize Councilman Eric Costello of the 11th District.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Should I continue?
Yes, you can go.
So the First Amendment, there's a comment, it's not an amendment, regarding the ability to create a voucher program. Law Department was unable to find law that expressly granted that authority, but we also didn't find anything that expressly prohibited local governments from enacting that voucher programs. So since we had nothing to base it on, we are just not commenting, even though we have concerns, because it looks like programs like this are reserved for HABC type entities. The source of funding was our next concern, and that has been we're going to reference the Board of Estimates. No, that's the wrong one. Sorry, that one is already taken care of. We're going to reference the charter and the process that's provided for in the Affordable Housing Trust Fund legislation. The legal issues, this is the procurement issue. We're just going to reference the Charter Article 6 and the Board of Estimates in the section dealing with how they do RFPs and letting the contracts for housing providers. We wanted to clarify the situation with termination of of people from the program. It was a little confusing about exactly what the degree of violation had to be in order to subject someone to being terminated. So we put some language in section I think it's 1422 that satisfies our concerns in that area. So that's it. They're fairly simple, straightforward amendments.
Thank you for that additional information. Now we'll move to the Mayor's Office of Human Services, which deferred to the Law Department, but we want to hear, and I think Katie York, you're representing the Office of Human Services?
Yes, Councilwoman Middleton. First off, we'd like to thank you for convening the committee. We'd also like to extend our thanks to Councilman Dorsey for really lifting up this conversation around permanent affordable housing options for our neighbors experiencing homelessness. I'd like to start by saying we're united in our commitment to creating and implementing some long-term, sustainable, and equitable housing solutions in our community. With that in mind, we do have a number of concerns regarding the content of the bill. We wholeheartedly support more housing for individuals and families experiencing homelessness in Baltimore City, but as written, the bill has some important funding, programmatic, and policy concerns which we believe must be resolved before the legislation moves forward. Our first concern, as the Law Department mentioned, is around the termination of assistance. As written, it contemplates two separate potential standards depending on if someone is in a tenant or project-based voucher. Given it's a single program with a single administrative appeals process, it would be really wise to have a single set of clear standards, dictating what grounds there are for program termination. Secondly, our concern is around the content on return to permanent supportive housing. Our understanding, and based on our conversations with HUD, is that this return to permanent supportive housing, once a household leaves it to enter this local voucher program, is not actually possible at this point in time. The permanent supportive housing programs really only allow programs to serve households which are literally homeless at the time of program entry. So if somebody is housed in a voucher program, they are not actually eligible, and we have this confirmed from our HUD representative. So I understand that there are provisions in the bill about petitioning HUD to have some flexibility on this point, but I'm uncertain on the feasibility of that, given the intent behind permanent supportive housing and the focus on serving literally homeless households. Next, the long-term financial sustainability of the proposed housing voucher program is somewhat uncertain. BBMR has indicated the general funds are not available now or really for the foreseeable future to support any implementation or administration of the voucher program. And the current staff at our agency have neither the workload capacity or really technical expertise to launch and operate a voucher program as written. Lastly, the Affordable Housing Trust Fund is really dependent on large-scale real estate transactions, which fluctuate significantly each year. And even between, this fiscal year and the last one, we had a 15% decline in revenue. If there are issues with this, general funds will not be available to plug any funding gaps, and we cannot use state or federal funds to support this program should we run into any sustainability issues. The ultimate outcome of that is that households in this program would return to homelessness as they have extremely limited income. Part of what's contemplated, 30% of area median income for a single individual is about $22,000 a year, and that's the cap. So while we're in line with that and support the need, this bill doesn't currently contemplate any connection to supportive services for these program participants, meaning that if we lose funding, they will have to navigate the loss of housing on their own, which is incredibly difficult. Our system is complicated and somewhat convoluted at best. And the bill does not contemplate support for these participants in the event that, funding and support is lost. Lastly, the hearing process that's designed in the bill is going to require the hiring of a hearing officer with a law degree, given the complicated nature of the hearings and the need for the hearing officer to reach a final conclusion of law. In order for the hearings to be properly conducted in accordance with the bill, we need additional funding for administration to hire a qualified hearing officer. Section 431 creates the right to judicial review and appellate court review for the review not only of termination of assistance, but denial of assistance, which creates a significant legal liability and will require additional staffing support not only at our agency, but from the law department's litigation division to prepare for any such review. Judicial review of housing terminations or denials is not standard process for terminations from our permanent supportive housing programs here in Baltimore. And we believe that this has the potential to create some pretty significant barriers to implementation. So ultimately, if we do not resolve these issues, the program is not going to lead to the stability and sustainability that we're all hoping for. So we really are hoping to work together and implement some revisions so we can get this to a place where it is equitable, sustainable, and long-term in our community. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for your testimony. And is there a representative from the Baltimore Police Department here? But they do have no position. And then we have, Michelle. Yes.
Hi, I'm trying to get my video to go.
Okay.
Let's see if this is working now. Okay, there.
I do.
Okay. We stand by our report, which was that we took no position. All that for that. Sorry.
Okay.
Fairly anticlimactic.
Thank you for your testimony. The Health Department.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Paul Nibber on behalf of the Baltimore City Health Department. As noted in our report, we do take no position on this, but I do want to emphasize on behalf of the Health Department that we do think of homelessness as an exigent situation that needs to be addressed, much like what the bill sponsor has already mentioned, as well as Madam State's Attorney. We believe that homelessness is a situation that contributes to all sorts of health related issues. It exacerbates things like mental health crises. It makes chronic disease worse. So there are certainly things that are associated with homelessness that need to be addressed in addition to just the housing component. And so we appreciate the conversation today, which is focused exclusively on that housing component. And because we don't have the expertise around that particular aspect, we are deferring to the Department of Housing and Community Development.
Thank you, and thank you for your added details. Next, we have the Department of Housing and Community Development, which was a favorable report. Who do we have that's going to speak? Stephanie Murdoch, are you speaking on behalf of Housing?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Stephanie Murdoch, Legislative Liaison for the Department of Housing and Community Development, reporting in on City Council Bill 210004, Office to End Homelessness. As we stated in our report, DHCD supports the intent of this legislation in concept, but we wanted to highlight a few concerns specifically around the role of the Commission and the volatility of the fund. The Charter establishes the duties of the Commission, including making recommendations, advising, and consulting with DHCD regarding expenditures and ongoing operation of the trust fund. The spending plan was developed collaboratively by DHCD and the Commission and included an extensive community engagement and participation component. Last year, the plan was amended in the same collaborative fashion based on less than projected tax revenue in both fiscal years 2020 and 2021 and to support pandemic-related relief. DHCD has concerns about legislating such a program when priorities and needs may change as a result of new leadership and other circumstances beyond our control, such as changing housing market conditions, the availability of affordable housing stock, and other factors. The current commissioner's terms have expired and the entire commission is up for reappointment by the mayor and city council. The new commission may bring changes in spending priorities. While the revised spending plan identified rent supplement as a priority, and as Councilman Dorsey mentioned, currently contains $1.3 million in such funding, it is difficult to predict what the future priorities of the administration, the agency, and the commission may be. Once you start funding a voucher program, it's an ongoing commitment, and it could come at the expense or exclusion of other priorities identified by the department and the commission. Should DHCD and the Commission be unable to provide consistent annual funding, the program would need to be funded with general funds. DHCD cautions against establishing a permanent housing voucher program without a permanent source of funding. It is worth noting that the primary source of the funding, a surcharge on high-value real estate recordation and transfer taxes, is highly volatile by nature and will vary from year to year. As I mentioned, the plan was already amended based on less than projected tax revenue, and the Commission approved a reallocation of funds from $33.5 million to $21 million in 2022. Spending priorities are established annually through a robust community process. Funding to support a permanent housing voucher program would have to be part of that process. DHCD supports the intent of this bill, and we appreciate the opportunity to highlight our concerns regarding the volatility of the funding source and the uncertainty of future spending priorities. The last thing we want to do is see an individual or family enrolled in this program not be sustained with continued funding. We look forward to working with the administration, the mayor's office to end homelessness, and the commission to discuss the establishment of a permanent housing voucher program. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephanie. And now we'll hear from the Housing Authority of Baltimore City. They do defer to Finance and MOHS, but is someone here to comment?
Madam Chair, Bill Wells from the Housing Authority of Baltimore City. Good afternoon. I'm well, thank you. The Housing Authority, because of the other concerns that have been raised, and echoing what DHCD had to say. In concept, supports any steps that would help with homelessness in the city. So our concerns have really already been echoed, or we would echo the concerns from law, finance, MOHS, and DHCD. And they really revolve around capacity, staffing, and funding. Additionally, the only, and so I didn't want to belabor those points since there are a lot of speakers. Additionally, we did want to point out that we are concerned about confusion in programs. Currently, the Housing Choice Voucher Program operated by the Housing Authority of Baltimore City is the program within the city. And having another program with a very similar title that is serving the same population while some of the requirements for entry are more restrictive, we're worried that as difficult as it is now, when people have questions and maybe go to DHCD or their council person or other folks to try and get answers and then eventually get routed back to HABC, we have concerns that that may be exacerbated by other programs and other programs that operate either with similar nomenclature or similar processes, but that are handled in some ways very differently from HABC's programs. So that's really the sum of our testimony, and we're happy to answer any questions later.
Thank you. And then lastly, the Department of Finance, which does oppose. Who do we have representing finance? Mara?
Yes, Mara James.
Hi, Mara.
Hi.
You're on.
Thank you. So our concerns in general have been discussed, but I thought I would take the time to kind of walk through our bill report to talk about the fiscal impact that we put together to help understand that. So to assess the fiscal impact of this bill, we reached out to MOHS and HABC. As we state, we believe the establishment of the office to end homelessness would be cost neutral, since it would just result in the elimination of MOHS and transferring those funds and positions. However, implementing a new permanent housing voucher program, we believe would require a large investment of funding for the vouchers, staff, and costs. We have estimates ranging from, our estimate ranges from 1.1 million to 1.9 million, depending on the number of vouchers provided annually and the hours required for a part-time hearing officer. We came to those numbers based on, first, for the vouchers and housing costs. We spoke with HABC, anticipated that a voucher for a single household would cost $922 per month, or approximately $11,000 annually. In addition, the legislation requires coverage for other housing costs, such as utilities, furniture, and moving expenses, which we estimated at $5,000 per household. So based on that, the annual cost for a single household voucher would be approximately $16,000. In speaking with MOHS, we estimated that there'd be a minimum need for 3 full-time staff positions and 1 part-time hearing officer to meet the requirements. Salary and benefit costs for these staff would be up to $321,835, depending on the number of hours required for the hearing officer. As Katie already explained, it would require an officer with a law degree, which would be a higher per hour cost, but we just estimated at the part-time, but that cost could go down depending on hours. Finally, our cost estimate includes $10,000 for technology and software and $5,000 for supplies and other costs. It's important to note that these estimates do not include housing inspections for the voucher program. These can cost $125 per unit per inspection and have an overhead cost of 10 to 15% per inspection. So it'll depend on the number of vouchers again and their overhead rate. In terms of funding and concerns related to that, my colleagues, other agencies have really spoken to this. The legislation states that the program can be funded by an annual appropriation from the Affordable Housing Trust Fund or in the Ordinance of Estimates. While the Affordable Housing Trust Fund, as established, can be used to fund this type of program, as Stephanie explained, there's certain procedures to establish approval for funding use that we need to go through. In addition, as Stephanie also explained very well, this is an unpredictable source of revenue. It's dependent on the housing market conditions. And we have seen an overall decline in transfer and recordation revenues across the board, as well as among those properties that are over $1 million, which is where the funding source for the Affordable Housing Trust Fund comes from. So considering that and the current fiscal financial situation and our projected budget deficit for fiscal 21 and likely in fiscal 2022, the Department of Finance cannot support implementation of the voucher program with general funds if the Affordable Housing Trust Fund is unable to provide funding. Establishing and running a new program at this scale would require us to pool resources from current services, resulting in cuts to other programs. And yeah, I think the rest of my points in our report have been covered by my colleagues, and I will answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony and report. Next, we're going to have the members of the committee. If you have any questions to any of the law department, not any of the law department, but any of the agencies, please raise your hand and we'll just go down the list if you have questions to any of the agencies at this point. And while you're getting that together, I just thought of one. I guess this is directed to the Office of Human Services for Katie York or anyone that can answer. So we do have a new administration with a new mayor, and he did designate certain tasks, a number of task force to basically talk about these different task force met. They did present a big portfolio of things that they would like to see in this term of Mayor Scott's office. Was there anything written in that report about homelessness that can be shared? Can anyone in the agency, the mayor's agency, comment on that?
I do believe there was content issued as to homeless services, but I don't have the transition report immediately available.
Okay, all right. I do see some hands raised from the committee, and we'll start with, I think Bullock was first. Councilman Bullock, you have a question?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. This is directed toward MOHS and Katie York. Thanks for joining us. You mentioned the HUD representative's perspective. Can you explain that a little bit? I think I missed a couple pieces there. Where did you think the conflict was, or what was presented to you?
Understood. So the conflict is that the continuum of care regulations, 24 CFR 578, if anyone is curious, requires that only individuals that are currently homeless be served through this program. So if somebody is in a local housing voucher program, they're not eligible until they exit. So the provision in the bill that requests, that states that a participant could request to return to permanent supportive housing could not happen in reality as the regulations stand. They would have to be literally homeless. Mind you, there's often an emphasis on serving chronically homeless, that is individuals who've been homeless for over a year or for, I believe, 4 or more instances in a 3-year period. So it has a very specific target population, and somebody who is housed in a local voucher program is not eligible. We did reach out to our HUD representative several weeks ago to discuss the local housing voucher program bill and this issue around eligibility of requesting to return. And as the response that I received is that households would not be eligible if they are currently housed in a local housing voucher program. So this concept of requesting a return to PSH is not particularly feasible. And I do want to be clear about where we stand in terms of permanent supportive housing availability in the city as a whole. There is an ongoing wait list for this. And so housing placements are made based on somebody's what is called a vulnerability assessment score and the number of available units. So if you have a household, let's say someone with 2 children who require a 3-bedroom unit, we have generously like 150 3-bedroom units available in our system. And that's a fixed number from HUD. We don't anticipate that changing. So that person would have to be placed on a list according to their vulnerability assessment score and then wait for a 3-bedroom unit to become available in a program, which could be a couple of months, it could be a couple of years, depending on the actual turnover rate of other households in that permanent supportive housing program. So I want to be clear that if somebody exits this program, they may essentially be without assistance for some extended period of time because the flow in our system is somewhat limited and there is so much demand for particularly family housing and limited supply of permanent supportive housing here in Baltimore.
Yeah, thank you for that. I'm sure that others have questions too, so I don't want to monopolize the time, but I just want to hear some more about the process. So it's not like so much of a conflict between having a voucher program, but the issue in terms of the ongoing steps.
That's accurate. Really, the only issue is around this request to return, which, like I said, households, as it stands per our national federal regulations, they would not be eligible to ask to return while they are currently enrolled in a housing voucher.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's important, especially since we're also in COVID.
Madam Chair, may I follow up on that?
Yes, go ahead.
Thank you. Katie, does MOHS acknowledge that this bill wholesale exempts that provision from the bill, making it 100% contingent on whether or not HUD should in the future grant a waiver to allow such a transfer?
Yes, we very much acknowledge that it is contingent on HUD granting a waiver. What we do want to speak to is the particular challenges around the likelihood of that happening, given the intent and design of supportive housing as serving households who are solely and homeless at the time of program entry.
But if the bill entirely exempts it and makes it entirely contingent on whether or not HUD may grant that waiver, and we acknowledge clearly that perhaps there is a very low likelihood that they will grant that waiver, that it's not actually a substantive problem, correct? It's not a substantive problem with the bill.
Pardon me. No, Councilman Dorsey, I don't know if I would qualify it so much as a substantive problem with the bill, so much as messaging to households who are considering entering this program. If we have a bill that states it is subject to HUD approval, we would want to be very clear as participants are sort of recruited for the program, the likelihood that they would be counting on this program to work because they return to permanent supportive housing after they have chosen to leave it is going to be an arduous uphill process.
Thank you, Madam Chair. If I could just acknowledge one last thing, that this mechanism for transfer back into permanent supportive housing is not an essential part of any moving on strategy. It's not a mechanism that exists in all move on strategy programs, but it is good when it's there. So even without this ability to transfer back into permanent supportive housing, such a program would still be considered a successful move on strategy. So even if HUD never grants that waiver, it's still a good program. And we're just carving out the opportunity to make the possibility of it and with the hope for it, really. Thank you.
Thank you. And Councilwoman Ramos, your hand is raised.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, committee members and agency staff and the councilman for bringing this bill back to us. I'm honored to be able to work on it with you. I have several questions for various agencies, if you don't mind indulging. Before I go into that, I just want to say two things. One is that Healthcare for the Homeless and the hospital systems and others are working really, really hard to create more permanent supportive housing. And as an advocate, we finally got the state to finally acknowledge that they needed to make sure that the low-income housing tax credits were also going to be available for permanent supportive housing. Until about 2 years ago, that wasn't the case. So it's important to know that while there is limited permanent supportive housing, the need is great, and yet there are people working on it. The other piece is that, as one of the leaders of the Affordable Housing Trust Fund a few years ago, one of the reasons that many of us got involved was because a permanent or some sort of voucher program was definitely part of the package of work that needed to be done in affordable housing in the city. So I'm super committed to some sort of voucher program moving forward. And I just wanted to say that before I started my questions. The first question might need to go to HABC and also DHCD. Someone brought up the issue of and maybe it was finance, the issue of the voucher not including utilities. It's my understanding that right now, current voucher programs, both at DHCD and HABC, do not cover utilities. Is that correct or not?
That's correct at HABC.
Thank you.
Yes, the Department of Housing and Community Development isn't currently running a program. The current eviction prevention program is over at MOHS.
What about when, if you don't mind, Madam Chair, what about when DHCD was doing the program, the voucher program for when folks were evicted because, or had to leave the property because of the new licensing law?
I don't believe that it included utility assistance, but I can circle back and circle back to the committee.
Thank you so much. I see Ms. Edwards is here. I wonder if she's able to answer that question about their rental assistance, including utilities.
Is Ms. Edwards, Tisha Edwards, are you able to speak? I don't see a response, so.
Mr. Symbolic actually put something in the chat about this. Rent payments, the voucher payments do include utility allowance.
Oh, you froze there.
The rent payments cover gross rent. Okay. Thank you for including that. The second question is for the law department. One of the, again, I just saw your report. I've had the first one, but then I just saw your second one. The amendment and the recommendation that the agency would have to apply for funds from the Affordable Housing Trust Fund. I have the charter up, the charter piece that we passed 4 or 5 years ago now, and I don't see that in there. I do know, from my understanding, is that the commission makes the decisions, and for instance, some money was just transferred over to DHCD to be able to do senior home repair. I'm not sure that an application is necessary. Can you clarify?
Well, I was referring to the application for the voucher program in that particular comment, not random other expenses. So if for example, if it were to go, the money gets transferred to HCD, but if it ends up being spent for a program that requires an application of some kind, then obviously it cannot be distributed. So I could be wrong. If I'm wrong, please let me know, whoever knows. But I was just imagining what the process would be for getting funding.
Yeah, we made the Affordable Housing Trust Fund very flexible so that it could be an RFP process, which the commission has been doing for some of the expenses.
Okay.
And Stephanie
I
can
could
correct
change
me.
that.
Yeah.
I'll go in and change that language to maybe something like subject to the procedures for HCD or something like that.
Okay, sure. Thank you. I appreciate your consideration about that. And I'll yield, and I have some more questions, but I'll allow my colleagues to
Is,
some more.
is,
I can come back to me. Thanks.
is there any other committee members that have any questions at this time? Please use the raise hand function. So I don't see any raise, so Odette, you can continue.
Madam Chair, I thought I saw Councilman Stokes.
Oh.
Councilman Stokes is trying to speak.
Oh, okay. Oh, now I see. Okay, we'll go with Councilman Stokes, and then after Stokes, we'll go with Councilman Glover. Councilman Stokes, are you there? We can't hear you. We'll skip a minute and go with Councilman Glover. Councilman Glover, you have a question?
Yes, Madam Chair. Can you hear me? Because I'm having difficulties, but can you guys hear me?
Yeah. Yes, we can hear your voice.
Okay. All right. Thank you. So my question is this, because HUD does have a backlog, how does it affect, those that are on fixed income that otherwise cannot afford rent and are in danger of becoming homeless?
Who can answer that from the agencies?
Councilman Middleton, I'm happy to address that.
Thank you.
I would like a point of clarification. When you say backlog, were you referring to the coordinated access system that was mentioned earlier, or is there something else?
Yes. That's what I was. Yeah, exactly. The waiting list.
So I do want to be clear that the waiting list is not, unlike Section 8 or say people who are seeking assistance through HABC, our criteria is not just those who are on a fixed income. They must also be actively without housing. In terms of how it affects people, it creates a fair amount of long-term stayers in our emergency shelter and or transitional housing programs across the city. But I do want to say that a lot of that wait time is reflective for people who are waiting for additional permanent supportive housing units, not just vouchers, as it were.
Okay. Madam Chair, can I ask one other question, please?
Yes, you may.
All right. Thank you. Another question, this is for finance. What would be, when you're reconstructing the new office, has salaries for the new positions been taken into effect for the upcoming budget? Like,
Yes.
if we were going to restructure this office, we're of course probably going to hire new positions, and they're going to create, other salaries, depending on those positions. Like, have we taken in effect, like, the budget? Like, are we going to have money for that?
Great question, and happy to answer. So in terms of the creation of the office itself, based on conversations and the previous term when this bill was introduced, or another version of this bill was introduced, we went on the assumption that the current funds and positions that are in the Office of Homeless Services would be moved to the new office, and that would generally be budget neutral. With the creation of the permanent voucher program, that was where we added in that there would need to be new positions for a new program, where it would be a program compliance officer, an accountant, an administrative coordinator, and a part-time hearing officer. And those figures are in our report of what those salaries would be. The note for the part-time hearing officer is that is a hourly rate that we took based on a similar position that is used by Environmental Control Board for their hearings. which is a $90 per hour rate, and it's a person with a law degree. And we assumed full part-time, but it would be dependent on the number of hours required for that position.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
And now we'll go back. I don't see any other hand raised, so we'll go back. Oh, I'm sorry. We'll go back to Robert, Councilman Stokes. Councilman, can you get in with us? Hello? Yeah, he's still having technical issues. So Robert Stokes, if you can hear me, you might want to try going out and then logging back in. And then in the meantime, we'll go back to Councilwoman Ramos.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have a couple of questions for the sponsor.
Absolutely.
Councilman, again, thanks for this. I have a couple of questions just given the reports and concerns from the agencies. Given that we're about to, the first part of your bill sets up a new office, and as acknowledged earlier, may not have the capacity for voucher, being able to administer vouchers. Would you be interested or willing, and I'm going to nominate Ms. Edwards without talking to her yet, but at least entertaining, having an agency with capacity to do the voucher program to do that first and then transfer it in, or somehow doing this, there's that piece, or there's a way to do the voucher program sort of in another year so that we can set up the capacity in this office.
That's an interesting question. I think that
and you can think about it. I didn't mean to put you on the spot.
Look, I think the idea of implementation of bills is more fluid than we might give credit for, right? The Complete Streets Manual, for example, that was an ordinance that was passed in 2018, and it had a 1.5-year implementation timeline in order to produce a manual. It still doesn't exist. It exists, it has not been formally adopted yet. But we accept that creating the framework of it laid the groundwork that it would be created in the time that it would take in order to get the job done. I don't suffer the delusion that a belief that the voucher program will come online on the 180th day after the signing of the bill, just the same as this office, will suddenly come into existence. I recognize that capacity building is an essential part of this, but I think that gearing up to firmly establish the office, get the office on a good footing, and having the top of the mind awareness that the office also has a mandate to get this program together and start to take those efforts as expeditiously as possible, I think is really all I would need in order to feel that we were moving forward as quickly as possible.
Okay, thanks. And then I guess the other question would be following up with Councilman Glover's question with the additional, the office is going to have, one-to-one from the Mayor's Office of Homeless Services to this new office, but it sounded like the hearing officer was something new. So that's still something that has to be negotiated with the mayor if it's going to be put in line for this budget, or we'll be thinking about it for next budget.
So I tried to touch on this and not go too far down the rabbit hole in my introductory remarks. And Mara helped make this clear. The establishment of the office, this transfer of personnel from what is called, the Mayor's Office of Homeless Services to this newly named office, that part of it is a one-to-one transfer. The additional staffing that is enumerated in the in a more detailed way in the Finance Department's report would all be additional staff. And they say 3 full-time positions and 1 part-time position. Now, look, I also take issue with the projections as to what this is going to cost. We're going to hear testimony, and I'll ask that, as Baltimore Regional Housing Partnership is a very, very experienced administrator of a voucher program much larger than this one, and they have a wealth of knowledge about what it takes, not just from their own experience, but because they are experts and can easily refer to federally published documents that talk about this stuff, which I didn't see referenced in the Finance Department report. It seems pretty clear that the Finance Department's projections are on the high end. I'll give you one highlight from that. For example, the Baltimore Regional Housing Partnership administers vouchers for over 4,300 families. And in 2019, the total costs for services provided by the Baltimore Regional Housing Partnership hearing officer was $5,900. That's because nobody hires a full-time or part-time person to do hearing officer duties. Nobody does that. It's a thing that's typically contracted out and paid on a fee-for-service basis, which is much more cost-effective. And it's just a reality that you're not dragging people into hearings every week or every month. You would have to be attempting to evict people on an almost daily basis to rack up the kind of cost needs that would be warranted by hiring somebody part-time for $100,000 or whatever. Any reasonable administration of the program would rely on contractual services for a hearing officer, and it would cost an extreme, far less than what is projected in the Finance Department's reports. I don't doubt that there are, and I acknowledge that there are other staffing resources required in order to be able to administer the program. And I look forward to Baltimore Regional Housing Partnership elaborating on that a little bit. And I would ask at that time if Madam Chair might offer perhaps a little bit more time to them for their testimony than perhaps the 2 minutes that we might otherwise hold people to. But these funds can all be covered. These positions are all part of what could be covered through the appropriation from the Affordable Housing Trust Fund. The trust fund money does not have to be limited literally to the dollars paid out for rent for the voucher or for utilities and the other things that this program would allow it to cover. It could be used also for the administration. To limit it to say that it can't be used for the administration would be, I don't know, it'd be tantamount to saying, we're going to buy you a house, but we won't pay for closing costs. It's an essential part of getting the job done.
Okay.
Thank you. I just wanted to add to that real quick, Madam Chair.
And then Councilwoman, in the chat, Ms. Edwards did say she's available to answer that question that you had, but you go ahead and finish, and then we'll let her on, and you repeat that question you would like her to answer.
Okay, sure. Thank you, Madam Chair. Councilman, the way that the trust fund is to work is that the administrative costs for running trust fund type programs is 5%. So it's going to be tough to pay for all the vouchers plus administration with the 5% of the amount, because that 5% is supposed to be going to administering all of the funding. So I think that the intent is to make sure that most of that money is going actually to vouchers and not necessarily to administration in this particular sense. But I guess we can continue that discussion and have to talk with the mayor's office, and maybe when we get more power of the budget, try to get those administrative expenses in. But anyway,
I would
that's how
say-
I understand it at the moment.
Excuse me.
Can I respond to that?
No, please let the councilwoman finish. Thank you.
Sure. And I just was going to repeat with what we were interested in to hear from Ms. Edwards. Again, I hadn't talked to her about it ahead of time, so I apologize for putting her on the spot. But you know, she's done an amazing job with the eviction prevention program, and I just thought, just kind of trying to answer some concerns from the other agencies, whether it makes sense to start out the voucher program, you know, under her leadership as the mayor's as the Office of Homeless Services gets itself going.
Thank you, Councilwoman Ramos, for acknowledging the hard work that we are trying to do in the eviction prevention work. I think it's really an issue of timing, Councilwoman. We have processed over 2,000 applications for eviction prevention. We have about 3,000 in the queue. Our team is swamped. This capacity for the eviction prevention program is currently funded through CDBG dollars, through our state CDBG fund. We have not expanded capacity to meet the new eviction prevention program. So at our CAP centers, we're doing energy assistance. We're looking at servicing up to 25,000 Baltimore residents through energy assistance. We are also doing water bill assistance, and now we are doing eviction prevention. So these are what I would call, you know, kind of essential upstream types of programming that we've had to build capacity to do. You know, we at the Mayor's Office of Homeless Services and the Mayor's Office of Children and Family Success see housing stability as a shared goal between both agencies. So of course, we will do anything and everything that we can to support families and children and anyone who is at risk of being housing unstable. But to think that we can implement this type of program without new capacity on either side of the house, I think is a flawed assumption. If we're going to do it, we need to do it right. If we're going to do it, we need to make sure that we have the expertise to support these families. We don't want to cause more trauma by implementing a program that we don't have the expertise or funding to support. So, you know, anything you ask me to do, Councilwoman, I'm happy to do it, and you know that. So you can count on both offices being supportive of addressing housing stability in our city. But I would ask that if the council feels that this is the road that we need to go down, then we must dedicate resources to be able to fully implement it, and to implement it in a way that meets the needs of the families. To try to underfund the administration of the program, it is disingenuous, and it sets us all up for disappointment. And I know that we don't want that. So I'm hoping that if the council moves forward, that it will move forward in a way that is needed to make sure that we're all positioned for success.
Thank you, Ms. Edwards, for coming on and answering the question. Before we get back to you, Councilwoman Ramos, I just want to let everyone know that I talked to Councilman Robert Stokes. So his computer shows him as unmuted, but we can't hear him. But he did send a message that his question has been asked and answered. So I wanted to get that in there. Councilwoman Ramos, back to you.
Thank you. I just wanted to say thank you to Ms. Edwards. Again, I hadn't talked to her ahead of time. So again, I'm just brainstorming here during the hearing, but I really appreciate everyone answering my questions. And I think I'm good for now. Thank you.
Okay. And just want to say over and over again, where the committee is not here to debate each other. We're here to gather information. You know, we have decisions that we have to make. So we must remain respectful to each other, and also that includes as we move on, since I don't see any more hands raised from the committee, we're going to move on to the attendees.
I'm sorry, Madam Chair. I did have some questions.
Councilman, I do see your hand up. So I'm going to get back to you, but I just want to say over again, we do have a long list of attendees that I'm going to go down, and I want to stay as close to the 2 minutes as possible. Councilman Dorsey, yes, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just had a question for Ms. Yorick. In her testimony, it was stated that there are 2 sets of hearing procedures for tenant versus project-based vouchers. I can't find anything to corroborate that statement in my bill.
Hi, Councilman Dorsey. To clarify, it's not that there are 2 hearing standards. There's one, and that's very clear. It's the standards for termination, like what qualifies as a program violation, because it states that if you are in a program-based voucher, that it's subject to the rules of that program, whereas a tenant-based voucher is sort of contemplated perhaps under another standard. So I would recommend as an amendment to this bill that it is clear that there is a single series of standards around what constitutes a program violation sufficient to lead to termination for anyone enrolled in the voucher program.
I just don't know at all where you're talking about in this bill.
I can give you the site if that's helpful. 1 second. 422A.
And what about it? 422A it sets standards for termination.
My apologies. 419G. So it states a housing provider receiving assistance under this section may not terminate a family's lease or fail to renew a family's lease unless the family has committed a serious breach of the lease or for other good cause in accordance with the program's rules and regulations. As written, it doesn't clarify what the program rules or regulations are, and because it is a project-based voucher, that leaves room for ambiguity. So I would just clarify that it, maybe just it's the addition of a word or two saying that it is the voucher program's rules and regulations and not so much subject to what a nonprofit provider could potentially implement in that situation. Does that make sense?
No. MOHS or this office would be responsible for any rules and regulations to be developed pursuant to this subtitle. I don't know how there could be any lack of clarity in the regulations that would be created by this agency for a program that would be administered by this agency.
Okay, so since we don't have a response, I think it's time to move on to attendees. And we're having technical difficulties on this end with sound and some other things, so bear with us. We're going to put up on the screen the instructions for attendees. And she's trying to get that up now. But we do know people that are on the phone, you're going to eventually hear 2 beeps, and that's going to let you in. And you can, if you don't want to testify, just say that you're not testifying publicly, and that will help to move things along much quicker. But as you see, the committee staff is coordinating the public testimony, so it's important to be patient. And as I mentioned, we are having a few technical difficulties with the person that's computer that's manning this. If you are connecting online, please use the raise hand function to indicate that you wish to testify. Each speaker must state their name prior to speaking, and we'll just stop there and just kind of get started. So there was a person and I'm going to just basically go down the list for attendees. And I see Dan, his hand was raised early on. And as I said, we're going to try to stick to the 2 minutes. But if I come in and just respectfully ask you to wrap up, that means you have gone over, and we want to kind of keep this moving. And we don't want to continually repeat the same thing over and over again. So please stay cognizant with these instructions. And so we're going to start with Dan. Dan, are you there? Hold on, we're trying to get Dan through. Just so you know, we're having a... Hi, Dan. Okay,
Hi,
just so you
Councilwoman.
know, we're having an off and on freezing of computers. So Dan, you go right ahead, please.
Thank you, and I will try to keep it to 2 minutes. I'm freezing on my end too, so maybe there's an app issue. But thank you for the hearing, Councilwoman and Chairwoman. And just a couple of quick questions about this. I mean, I followed it closely. I think with the new mayor, I think my primary question is why not work together with the administration on this? I mean, the second goal in the 100-day plan in that transition report says hire somebody really good to run homeless services. And I bet whoever that is going to have input on this program and this legislation. And I don't know why the council would not work with the administration on that. And it seems like the administration is stating a position through finance law, MOHS. And I think there's a lot of questions that are being asked that need an answer beyond this hearing. Second question. So first, can we all just work together? Like, you have a new mayor, a lot of empty seats at HCD that have to get filled, a lot of change afoot. Second question is more technical for the council. You know, why is there a hearing being held on this bill or any other without a policy and fiscal note? It was my understanding that that was going to be a new rule for this council. I'm just curious if that's still the case. I think it'd be really helpful here because it would answer some questions that would make very clear what this bill is actually doing. And I think it's really, I think you guys, it's a serious obligation you have to your constituents to tell them what you're doing. This bill doesn't end homelessness, but that's okay. This bill has picked a very small subset of the homeless population and is going to serve them. Nothing wrong with that, but you got to say so in writing. And then there has to be a conversation about whether or not that's the right approach. A couple final quick questions. I mean, why not build affordable housing for this population of people? Like, why another voucher program? I don't really understand that. And particularly in light of my other questions. First, you're asking people to leave federally funded programs that have been in place for a long time and ask them to join a brand new city program to rely on their housing. I don't think that's I certainly wouldn't do that if I were in this program, given the city's track record. And the question is, who would? And if the promise that, obviously there's some debate about this, can you return to permanent supportive housing if you don't like what we give you, or if you lose this somehow? And the question is, can they? You know, the fact that that's even an option, it says, that's a question to me. First, why would tenants want to participate? The second, why would landlords? You know, that provision that says you cannot terminate a tenancy for anyone except for very specific reasons, that's basically a poison pill. So I'm not sure who the landlords are who are going to participate in this. It's not going to be a very large number of people, in my view. So those are other questions, but there's so many more. I'm going to cut myself off here, and I hope you give this all a lot of thought.
Thank you. I'm sure the committee has written down your important questions, and we'll move on to Matt Hill. Thank you for your testimony, Dan.
Thank you.
Matt, are you there? As I said, we're having be patient. We'll get you in.
Hello, Madam Chair, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Thank you. So this is Matt Hill. I'm an attorney at the Public Justice Center. Public Justice Center is in strong support of this bill. Homelessness, as this council knows, presents a moral imperative for the council to act. How long do we wait until the council takes action? If not now, in the middle of a pandemic, then when? What's the alternative? This bill implements a proven cost-effective strategy to get people off the streets and into housing ASAP. How do we not push through some of the concerns that have been raised today? First, I just want to answer Councilwoman Ramos's question. Yes, this was part, this local voucher program was part of, or actually it was your question, Madam Chair, I'm sorry, of the mayor's transition report. It's on page 38. I was on one of the committees that worked on it, and this was part of the discussion. And so the voucher program is a recommendation there. And that's because this council has had discussion about this, right? This bill is being reintroduced. There's been work on this, and I'm strongly in support of this program. I just want to talk for a second from the Affordable Housing Trust Fund perspective, which I'm a commission member. The local voucher program meets a critical need in the trust fund's priorities as the only allocation specifically designated to meet the needs of persons who are homeless. No other allocation does that. DHCD has proposed, with input from the commission, $1.3 million for the rent supplement program. The intent of that allocation is to fund, in my opinion, this voucher program, and members of the commission, including myself, have expressed our strong desire that this program be targeted to assist people who are homeless and have these legislative guardrails to ensure that participants are treated fairly. The only other thing I want to address is the idea that there's no permanent revenue source for this program. I don't think that's true. There is a permanent revenue source for the Affordable Housing Trust Fund, and it has ample stability for a $1.3 million annual allocation. So the trust fund received revenue from this designated real estate surtax in the amount of $7.1 million in FY 2020. That was part of a $9.1 million total revenue. It's on course to realize a similar amount for 2021.
Try to wrap it up.
Wrapping up. Okay. So my point is $7.1 million in the middle of a global pandemic is really good. It was supposed to be $13 million. But look, even in the middle of a pandemic, we're bringing in $7 million a year from this real estate tax. It's more than enough to pay for a $1.3 million program. And finally, to Councilwoman Ramos's point, the 5% cap is on administrative expenses for the fund. So it's to fund the administration of the fund. There's no cap, as far as I know, about using this money to pay for the administrative expenses in running the voucher program. Thank you.
Thank you. Peter Symbolic, you're next. Or Symbolic? Pete?
Because of this device, I can't unmute.
Okay. I'm getting a message. Because of your device, we can't unmute you. We're unable to unmute you. Can you hear me? Okay.
To computer. Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
You got 2 minutes.
Okay.
Madam Chair.
Yes.
Before he begins, is it possible that Peter could be given a greater length of time? He is a representative from Baltimore Regional Housing Partnership. He is exceptionally knowledgeable on this specific subject in a way that perhaps nobody else in the city is.
We'll let him go ahead and start, but we don't want to be repetitious. I'd like you, Pete, to please try to give the main points, and that will help you out.
Sure. Thank you, Madam Chair. My name is Pete Symbolic. I'm the Managing Director of the Operations and Program Evaluation with Baltimore Regional Housing Partnership, BRHP. We, of course, administer the Baltimore Housing Mobility Program, which couples counseling supports with rental assistance provided under the Federal Housing Choice Voucher Program. We administer more than 4,300 vouchers, as Councilman Dorsey mentioned, in Baltimore City and throughout the Baltimore region. We wholeheartedly support Council Bill 2104, as it is a sorely needed tool in the arsenal of those combating homelessness in the city. Beyond our full-throated endorsement of this bill, though, I wanted to speak to this committee from the viewpoint of a voucher administrator to dispel some of the myths and misinformation that I've seen surrounding the bill. First, on the cost to administer. Having reviewed the memo prepared by the Department of Finance, I believe the administrative cost of this program is significantly out of step with what voucher administration is known to cost. The Department of Finance estimates an administrative cost of $320,000+, and I believe the actual cost to be far lower, closer to 1/3 of that figure. One of the most significantly inflated figures is the cost for the hearing officer, and I won't cover this again because Councilman Dorsey mentioned this, but our total cost for hearing officer services in 2019, a year with, without the pandemic, full host of hearings and terminations, was only $5,900. From the standpoint of staffing, though, I also wanted to take issue with the estimates from the Department of Finance. HUD undertook a comprehensive study on the cost to administer a voucher program and published those results in 2015. That study looked at 60 different voucher programs of varying size, geographies, cost markets, and arrived at a cost range of $42 to $108 per voucher per month, which would put the cost range for a 100 voucher program at anywhere from $50,000 up to $129,000. These estimates cover the full life cycle of the voucher, from waiting lists, eligibility determination, the lease-up process, inspections, recertification of income, and terminations and hearings. Another good source for estimating costs would be the actual administrative fees paid to public housing authorities. In 2020, HUD's administrative fee rates for vouchers in the Baltimore region, specific to our region, is $87.10 per voucher per month. For 100 vouchers, for instance, that would work out to a cost of $104,000 over the course of a year, less than 1/3 of the estimate provided to you from the Department of Finance. Next, from the standpoint of staffing, I'd like to give the committee a sense of the scale of the program and staffing needs to run a voucher program effectively and efficiently. As I mentioned, BRHP administers over 4,300 vouchers. With those 4,300 vouchers, we have a staff of 8 voucher specialists and 2 supervisors overseeing their work. A 100 voucher program would be equivalent to approximately 1/4 to 1/5 of a full-time employee, using our caseloads as a benchmark. While starting a new voucher program may seem daunting, there is expertise in this domain from mission-driven entities like BRHP, which provides technical assistance to programs throughout the country, to for-profit consultant groups who have long histories of providing technical assistance and even administering voucher programs, large and small. In closing, I would urge the council to pass this bill with the urgency it deserves. Thank you.
Thank you. And you did submit your testimony, correct?
I have not, Madam Chair, but I will submit that.
Please do that. Thank you so much. The next person's Harriet Smith. Harriet Smith. Harriet,
Hi.
can you
hear me?
Yes, we can.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you so much, Madam Chair.
2 minutes.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So my name is Harriet Smith. I work for the Baltimore Harm Reduction Coalition. I'm also a resident of Waverly, so Council Member Ramos is my representative. I've been working with people experiencing homelessness in a variety of capacities for over 10 years. Primarily assisting people who lack documentation and some of the requirements of a number of the programs that have been discussed here today. I'll keep it really short. Ms. Edwards asked that we get it right. She said, let's not go fast, something to the effect of, let's not go so fast that we don't get it right. I hope she would agree that what is currently practiced here in Baltimore is far from right. It is really messy, and the barriers to entry are astonishingly high. Having to document one's homelessness for 3+ years, not allowing people to be considered homeless if they are exiting incarceration, even if they are exiting into homelessness, those types of things create such high barriers that I think another program to fill the gaps where HUD is leaving many would really benefit Baltimore citizens. And so I hope that you will consider this. I hope that we'll both get it right and get it right quickly, because people are dying on the streets. Each day we hear of people in inadequate shelter with serious injury, and a number of times we hear of people passing away in inadequate shelter on the street. So we really hope that for people who are really disconnected from a variety of services, disconnected from a lot of documentation, that we can get it right and get it right quickly, because they won't survive if we wait too much longer. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Delaney Anderson. Delaney
Yes.
Anderson.
Can you hear me?
Yes, 2
Okay,
minutes.
great. Great. Thank you, Madam Chair. Good afternoon, members of the committee. My name is Delaney Anderson, and I am a student attorney at the Public Health Law Clinic at University of Maryland School of Law. I'm also a resident of Baltimore City's 11th District. In my clinic, we have focused on homelessness from a public health perspective. We've researched the negative health impacts of homelessness and seen clients struggle through those impacts in our eviction prevention project. Homelessness affects health negatively in many ways. It exacerbates a person's existing medical issues. It makes treatment and managing medications more difficult, has an overall negative impact on health. Homelessness itself also creates new health concerns. People who are homeless lack access to shelter, healthy food sources, and the ability to be distant from others. It increases the contraction of communicable diseases and adds additional stress to the body, factors that are all the more concerning with COVID-19 running rampant through our community. This bill in turn promotes positive health outcomes because health cannot happen without housing. Housing vouchers specifically address the combination of conditions that creates homelessness: lack of permanent affordable housing and an inability to pay. Families with vouchers have reduced rates of hospitalization, food insecurity, intimate partner violence, and child separation. As a result, research shows that a housing voucher program will reduce costs expended in public and healthcare services. And perhaps most compelling of all, our community members who are experiencing homelessness identified a voucher program as the most needed and desired housing resource. As a Baltimore resident and a public health law student, I hope for a community where all Baltimoreans are able to benefit and contribute. This bill will not only improve health outcomes, but will help to ensure that every member of our community is valued and cared for as our neighbor. So I ask for a favorable recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you. And now we'll move to Carolyn Johnson. Oh, who? Oh, I'm sorry. Back up. Delaney Anderson?
Yes.
That she just spoke. So now we're with Carolyn Johnson. Thank you, Delaney.
This is still Delaney. I'm sorry.
Okay. Yeah, she's trying to. Carolyn Johnson, are you on?
This is Carolyn. Can you hear me?
Yes, 2 minutes.
Okay, great. My name is Carolyn Johnson, and I'm the managing attorney at the Homeless Persons Representation Project. We're in strong support of this bill. The affordable housing crisis in this country has been longstanding and continues to reach new heights as millions of renters struggle to maintain their housing during the pandemic. Baltimore City has a shortage of over 28,000 affordable rental units for the lowest income families. And this lack of affordable housing and its consequences, including homelessness, disproportionately impact Black households. While the population of Baltimore City is 61% Black, 74% of homeless individuals are Black, and 83% of homeless families with children are Black. These racial disparities are the result of decades of direct and systemic racism in federal, state, and local housing policy. New housing policy must acknowledge this past and aim to provide remedies that provide opportunities to Black families that are historically included. In 2019, the Baltimore City Continuum of Care created its Community Action Plan on Homelessness, recognizing that safe, affordable housing is the solution to homelessness. The action plan specifically recommends a local housing voucher program, finding that Baltimore, that as the federal government continues to decrease funding, that cities like Baltimore can no longer wait and must take action to serve their own communities. I'd also like to point out a few important components of the Office to End Homelessness. It charges the office with a clear mission and will be guided by certain values and principles like promoting race equity, decriminalizing homelessness, and engaging people with lived experience of homelessness. The importance of centering race equity in the work of ending homelessness cannot be overstated. And a critical component of centering race equity is engaging people of color with lived experience of homelessness in all efforts, including creating programs, setting public policy, and designing systems. This bill not only endorses this approach, it requires it. We cannot just keep talking and talking about affordable housing and the homelessness crisis.
Time to wrap up.
Thank you. We must take action, and the time to take action is now. I thank this committee and urge a favorable report.
Thank you. Moving on to Hannah Roberts.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you. My name is Hannah Roberts, and I am here to share my perspective as a Baltimore City resident and former Chief of Staff for the Mayor's Office of Homeless Services. Last year, when this bill was introduced, I reflected on the life and tragic death of Paul Baylor, a passionate and committed advocate and colleague who regularly spoke of the inhumane and terrifying conditions faced by those sleeping outside or staying in shelter. In the few months since that conversation, more lives have been lost. Fortunately, there are proven solutions, and I am heartened to see some of them included in this bill. The proposed local housing voucher program, inclusive of a move-on strategy, is a creative and cost-effective solution based on national best practices, incentivized by HUD, and recommended by our own community in its action plan. Notably, the local housing voucher program will not only create new permanent housing, but it has the secondary benefit of maximizing the use of our limited permanent supportive housing inventory for those that most need it. It's an imperative in Baltimore City, where the need for both types of housing continue to grossly outpace their availability. On some of the concerns raised, and based on my own experience working for MOHS, I acknowledge and fully understand the limited resources and capacity of MOHS to administer a new program. It would be wise to expect that the initial design and launch of the program will require additional resources. With that said, the ongoing administrative costs, including fiscal and programmatic oversight of federal programs administered by MOHS, are federally limited at 7 to 10%, and it's reasonable to expect that this program could be administered at a much lower cost than suggested. And second, concerning the long-term sustainability of this program, we will not solve homelessness by depending on our existing federal resources alone, and we cannot afford to decline the opportunity to introduce additional resources and cost-effective housing solutions. Rather than suggest people might be returned to homelessness, I would challenge the city to use this opportunity to launch the program and then identify additional long-term financing solutions should they be needed.
Time to wrap up.
Thank you. The challenge of ending homelessness is daunting, but it's not insurmountable. People's lives are depending on us, and this bill is an important step forward, and I encourage our city council and community members to support its enactment. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. And just a reminder, after you've spoken, can you lower your hand raise, please? And now we'll move to Robin Dorsey.
Thank you, Chair, members of the committee. My name is Robin Dorsey. I'm the Fair Housing Director of the Fair Housing Action Center of Maryland. We work to ensure that every Marylander has access to safe, affordable housing, free from discrimination, harassment, and code violations. We are a program of the Maryland Consumer Rights Coalition, which advances economic justice and financial inclusion through direct service, research, organizing, education, and advocacy. I'm here today to speak in support of this bill as essential to the promotion of fair housing in Baltimore.
The Federal Fair Housing Act, passed in 1968, created an obligation for municipalities to actively pursue free and fair housing choice. But more than 50 years later, Baltimore is just as hyper-segregated today as it was then. The city has failed to fulfill its obligation to affirmatively further fair housing. The Baltimore Metropolitan Council recently published an analysis of the impediments to fair housing in the region, and it identifies a significant shortage of deeply affordable rental units and public subsidies as a key issue in fair housing. Though the lack of affordable units impacts all poverty level households, Black families and people with disabilities are disproportionately likely to face cost burdens, overcrowding, eviction, and of course, homelessness. The report specifically calls out the lack of public subsidies for extremely low income households as a key factor in the affordability shortage. This bill begins to address that problem by creating a permanent voucher program for families who have been chronically homeless. We consider this bill a small but vital step towards Baltimore City fulfilling its obligation to promote free and fair housing choice and urge a favorable report.
Thank you. Tisha Guthrie?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, 2 minutes.
Yes, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
My name is Tisha Guthrie. Thank you, Madam Chair, committee, and the community at large. Again, my name is Tisha Guthrie, and I am a commissioner for the Affordable Housing Trust Fund. In 2016, Baltimore residents made a clear demand to have the perpetual issue of housing insecurity, which can tragically lead to the experience of homelessness, acknowledged, addressed, prioritized, and ultimately remedied. We are making progress, but there is a tremendous amount of work to do. As we know, establishing policies is part of an eternal process. Making the measurable changes entails ingenuity and courage. This bill takes a courageous step in the direction of acknowledging the dire economic, social, and health inequities in our city and our neighbors who are often the collateral damage. The Affordable Housing Trust Fund was established with these sisters and brothers in mind. Homelessness has many faces, and they are all worthy of opportunity. For far too long, opportunity has been placed out of reach for the very people for whom this city has been made and the DNA of the city is made. Luxury condos and high-end apartment living is killing our children, their mothers and fathers. The trust fund has the potential to start allocating resources to restructure a housing industry which turns a blind eye to the realities of a society which daily becomes less and less affordable for the hardworking constituents of the city. As an Affordable Housing Trust Fund commissioner, I strongly support this bill and ask for a favorable report. And I also ask and beg that we do not make the perfect the enemy of the good. Thank you.
Thank you. And the next is Anyinyi Alhiri. I hope I didn't chop that up too much. Anyinyi Alhiri, are you there?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. Yes, it's Onini Alheri, so you're quite close.
Oh, you gotta just a little low. You need to speak up a little more, I guess.
Okay. I will project my voice as best I can.
Okay. That's a little better. Go ahead.
Okay,
you have a couple minutes.
All right. And I apologize, it might be on my end, the audio issues. But my name is Onini Alheri. I work with Charm City Care Connection, an organization that serves people who use drugs in East Baltimore. And we are in support of the establishment of an office to end homelessness and a permanent housing voucher program with inclusive language. We know that a lack of access to housing has a negative impact on a person's mental and physical health, and many of our participants struggle to maintain such housing. often sleeping in parks, under bridges, or in abandoned buildings, increasing their chance of acute and potentially fatal emergencies, including overdose, fires, carbon monoxide inhalation, severe frostbite, and violence of various forms. Furthermore, and I think this is the most important point, is that their drug use precludes them from accessing many public shelters, including those currently operated by the Mayor's Office of Homeless Services, whose policies explicitly prohibit people who use drugs from staying on the premises.
You're just gonna have to try to find that.
We know that,
oh,
I'm sorry.
You just have to.
Get a little audio. Yeah, so I mean, I have lots of stories of clients who have lost their jobs as a result of the pandemic and experienced depression, which resulted in an uptick of their chaotic drug use, which they often experience in isolation, which in turn increases their risk of fatal overdose. We also know that Baltimore City is the #1, or has the highest per capita prevalence of injection drug use in the nation. And so all services provided by this proposed office must be inclusive of people who use drugs. Sadly, homelessness and drug use tend to go hand in hand. So to exclude people who use drugs would be excluding many people in the city who are experiencing homelessness. We are excited by this novel approach to making homelessness rare, brief, and non-recurring, but we do hope that this language will reflect the understanding that many of our folks, many people who use drugs, are the ones who constitute the homeless population in our city. We're happy to work with you on development of that language to ensure inclusivity, but we just want to make sure that people who use drugs are not left out of these much needed services. Thank you.
Thank you. And next we have LaWanda Williams.
Yes, hello, and good afternoon. Thank you for the opportunity to speak with you all this afternoon. Again, my name is LaWanda Williams, and I'm the Chief Behavioral Health Officer at Healthcare for the Homeless. So I come before you this afternoon really as a social worker doing work in homeless services for over the past 10 years. You know, our organization is one that's grounded in the intersection of health and housing. And we've known for quite some time that any intervention that we put into place that's grounded in housing is going to be that much more effective. The work that we do at Healthcare for the Homeless is really grounded in a permanent supportive housing model to deliver housing services to some of our most vulnerable citizens. And so with that said, it might seem a little strange that we're in support of this bill, given that it is a bit different from our traditional model of care, but there's two primary reasons for this. We, at our core, see housing as a human right. And we are absolutely believing that a robust housing continuum that meets the needs of all of our citizens is a very important method to making sure that homelessness is rare and brief. You know, the other primary reason why we are in support of this bill is that we believe that clients can recover. They come to us looking for services and provision of care. And oftentimes in our model, we're working with people who are really having some challenges. And we're working with them pretty intensively to help them to be able to make the kinds of gains in their life that they've identified for themselves. And we see that, you know, with that model, we've really been able to see that people recover. And it's a beautiful thing to watch. And I've seen it many, many times over my career. In fact, you know, I see it every day. People are really able to recover to the point that they no longer need intensive services that are provided within a permanent supportive housing model. We know that permanent supportive housing is absolutely still critically needed. The need for it remains. But we also know that there are options that are needed for individuals who no longer need that level of support, but still need the support of housing. In terms of the financial aspects of that. So there are questions about whether or not, you know, we should move this forward because of, you know, their issues around HUD and not being able to guarantee that people can return. But saying that people shouldn't have a pathway to return is sort of not acknowledging the fact that people are human and people make mistakes, and all of us have, you know, possibly not done well our first time around trying to move into our own, right? And the difference between us is our access. And so these are options that are needed for our clients. We're in the middle of a pandemic, and this is a really great way to correct some of the historical transgressions that we've made as a city in terms of being the birthplace of housing segregation. So
thank you for your testimony.
Yeah, thank you.
We're going to do we're going on the phones. So you'll hear these beeps. VJ, someone named VJ on the phone. Quickly, 2 minutes. Hello? VJ, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hello?
I think it might be.
I hear something. Are you going to testify or hello?
Vice President Middleton, I do not want to testify. I don't know how the hand raising function went up. I apologize.
Thank you. I'll move on. Antonia, are you there?
Yes, I'm not testifying.
Thank you. Thank you. Appreciate it. Moving on. Jamie Kramer, are you testifying? Jamie
No.
Kramer, hello?
Hi, no, I'm not testifying.
Thank you. Jeff Garrett? Jeff Garrett.
Yes, hello?
Hello, Jeff. Are you testifying?
Yes, I am.
2 minutes.
Thank you for having me. Yes, hi, my name is Jeff Garrett. I am actually a homeless advocate, having experienced homelessness in Baltimore. I have successfully come through the rapid rehousing program that was enacted in Baltimore, I could say. I am fully in support of passage of this bill. I can think of no reason not to. It's in the best interest of everyone to have as much hands on deck to oversee this situation as possible. More eyes looking on the situation only benefits us all. The leadership that's involved in MOHS needs additional help that I believe under the leadership of the City Council, they will be able to get that. And as far as the housing voucher goes, it's been proven federally, nationally, everywhere. It's cheaper to house people than to run any other kind of program, and that includes our shelters and such. So anything that involves getting people in the houses faster, you should support. Thank you.
Thank you. And again, I'm doing the phones first for those that don't understand. Lena Leone. Lena, are you there? Are you testifying?
I am not testifying.
Thank you. Moving on to Siwa. Siwa on the phone, are you testifying?
I'm not testifying.
And okay, it's disappeared. Make sure put yourself on mute. We hear someone that's moving around. So now we're going to okay, now it's the attendees on the computer that want to testify. And okay, if you have signed in as an attendee by your computer, may raise your hand to testify. Raise your hand if you those that signed in by the computer. And I'm going to go down the list. If you're on the computer and you want to testify, raise your hand. That way we can get through this. And I do see Corey Warren.
Madam Chair.
Yes. Yes, Councilman.
I believe that the committee staff could force the muting of Dan, who looks like he's unmuted and whose keyboard I continue to think I hear. Thank you. And I did see Corey Warren also had a hand up. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for picking that up. Corey, are your hand's up? You want to testify? Corey, can you hear me?
Oh, sorry. I just realized. Can you guys hear me now?
Yes. You got
okay. All right. Thank you, ma'am. My name's Corey Warren. I'm a staff attorney with Disability Rights Maryland. We are the protection and advocacy agency for Maryland, mandated to advance the civil rights of people with disabilities. So thank you for the opportunity to comment on Bill 21-0004. Disability rights is in support. Just speaking on behalf of the people we represent, investing in tenant-based rental assistance prevents people from disabilities from being unnecessarily institutionalized and keeps them as members of their own communities, which is a mandate under the Olmsted decision. People with disabilities have historically been forced into institutional settings, including state hospitals, nursing homes, and criminal justice system, when they are given barriers to housing. Studies have found that people with disabilities experiencing homelessness who are moved to permanent supportive housing experience marked reduction in shelter use, hospitalizations, length of stay per hospitalization, and time incarcerated. In New York City, a study was done showing that prior to living in permanent supportive housing, people with severe mental illnesses experienced homelessness. It was costing approximately $40,449 per person per year in such services and institutional settings. However, when those individuals were moved into permanent supportive housing, the average cost was $23,172. So it's close to 20 grand savings per individual who is moved into permanent supportive housing out of an institutional setting. Furthermore, in 2019, our organization, along with the Behavioral Health Systems of Baltimore and Open Societies Institute, had a conference with relevant stakeholders, and we asked all the stakeholders at that conference to identify the #1 priority to reduce unnecessary police encounters, and overwhelmingly it was housing. Across the board, the #1 thing we have heard is if you want to keep individuals with disabilities out of prisons and hospitals, you have to provide housing. We think that having the local voucher program and creating this office is absolutely necessary to achieving that goal. And so we hope that we hear back with a favorable report. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Corey. And looking down, one more time, I don't see any more hands raised. So, Councilman Dorsey, I'm going to ask you if you'd like any final comments.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think I just want to express my deep appreciation to everybody who has come to testify in support of this bill today. Healthcare for the Homeless, Homeless Persons Representation Project, the Public Justice Center, the State's Attorney's Office, Disability Rights Maryland, Maryland Consumer Rights Coalition, and I'm sure that I've missed some others, the representatives like Keisha Guthrie of the Affordable Housing Trust Fund Advisory Commission, and I think I'm especially Baltimore Regional Housing Partnership. I am especially appreciative of Peter shedding light on the fact that the federal government published a study that reviewed 60 different voucher programs and looked at really what it costs to administer programs. So we have that as I think a solid source of information in terms of what it should realistically cost to run a voucher program. And I just want to express my appreciation for everybody who has iterated and reiterated the sentiment that homelessness is an issue that requires urgency of action, and that providing housing is the best possible solution, and that it is incumbent upon us to take every available effort to provide additional housing, that this is a best practice in terms of allowing people who no longer need the costly case management and full suite of wraparound services that permanent supportive housing offers, that some of those people will have, that will be, their lives will be improved enough that moving into a new program like this makes sense, and clears the deck for others who are in a more vulnerable position to move into that sorely needed permanent supportive housing. I just want to thank the law department for preparing their amendments. If I could, I'd like to move to adopt the amendments of the law department to resolve the concerns that were raised by them.
Madam Chair.
They hadn't been presented.
Yes. Yes, Councilwoman Ramos, but I do want to make a statement that the amendments have not been presented. But go ahead, Councilwoman.
That was
Ramos.
my point of clarification. And I also wanted to work with the sponsor on the first one that they had said, because I don't want the new office to have to apply for funding from the Housing Trust Fund each year when they don't really have to. So if you don't mind, Councilman, I'd like to work with you on this, and be able to come back and figure that out.
That was my mistake. I was sent a revised set of amendments from the law department. They were distributed to the mayor's staff, the council president's staff, the committee staff. I thought that they had been distributed to the committee. They resolved the concern.
No, we don't have them.
Well,
they were distributed. They were distributed to us during the hearing, so we haven't had time.
Oh, okay.
Again, I just want to clarify that one particular one. That's all, Councilman. Because I don't want to have to tie them down to have to.
Any other committee members have an opinion at this point, or have another statement to make? Any committee members? Any comment?
Madam Chair, I think I do need some time to think this over. I want to make sure that we have an opportunity to review all the materials. I know a lot of it we got just before this committee as well.
Councilman Stokes, I think I see read your voice that you said you agree with Councilman Conway. Okay, it looks like to me at this point that we cannot come to a vote. And there were some comments made even from some of the attendees that we'd like to see some more work done on this bill with the administration. That's what we're trying to get the policy not clear, so that it can go to our mayor for signature, but there still seems to be some work that needs to be done. I think an attendee also mentioned about a fiscal note. Is there any other comments that the committee a committee member would like to say? Because at this point, it seems like the hearing needs to go into recess, and then we'll send out notifications about a future meeting. But I
do see one other person in the chat literally typing, "I have been hollering to testify." This person seems to have wanted to testify.
Well, at this point, the committee has made a suggestion I'm hearing that started with Councilwoman Ramos. So I apologize. We finished the testimony, and clearly it was a lot of people that testified. Councilwoman Ramos, were you getting ready to say something?
Yes, Madam Chair, if you don't mind, I just want to reiterate my commitment to working with the councilman and working on this bill, because I think it's great. And I just want to clarify a couple of those points and then back with, getting this done. And it's really important. So I just want to make that.
And I agree with you, and I'm feeling that that's the sentiment of the entire committee.
I would not have made a motion to move the amendments had I realized they had not been distributed. I was sent them, the mayor's staff was sent them, the council president's staff was sent them, the committee staff was sent them. I believed that they had been sent to the rest of the committee, and I have no problem, convening at a later date to vote on amendments on the bill.
Okay, this person that wants to testify, I think I'm going to go ahead and just give them the 2 minutes. Could you let them in? Because they're, okay, hello?
Yes.
Yes, you have 2 minutes. Could you please go ahead and do your statement, because we've moved to our committee talk.
Yes, my name is Achke Oranya, and I'm the division director at People Encouraging People. I've been doing street outreach in the city for the past 16 years. I've been participating in providing on-the-ground support for people who are moving from homelessness to housing. We've done a lot of work in the community, and just like some of the people that already testified reiterated, we just don't really want a situation where the pursuit of the perfect kind of denies us of the opportunity to move forward with this bill. I'm speaking from the perspective of certified mental health therapists and providing companionship to many of the numerous homeless brethren in the community for the past 15 years, and transitioning people to housing from the many encampments that we've worked, starting from Warren Street, 83, Patapsco, and all the gamut. And we work with people who are struggling with both homelessness, mental illness, and addiction. And basically the whole stats is out there, but we know that out of the percentage of people who are homeless, we have the most troubling thing is that we have about 84% actually of the homeless people being based, from the minority African Americans. And then again, the second thing is, 45% of those people are severely mentally ill, and we just can't afford a situation where we're trying to, provide this type of support to the community to admit, people from homelessness into a resource that's going to give them a shot at becoming independent. So my wholehearted support is for us to be able to move forward in addition to adopting the amendments already proposed, especially in terms of tying support.
I want to thank you. Could you wrap it up? Because you're over your 2 minutes. You're over your 2 minutes, sir. Could you wrap it up?
I want to thank you and the committee for the work that you people are doing, and I'm wholeheartedly on behalf of People Encouraging People, wanting us to do the best for those who really need the most. That is part of what this bill is going to do.
Thank you so much. And we're, as I stated with everyone, and the committee is expressing as well, this is a very important bill, lots of decisions to be made. It's about working with the administration as well. So at this point, the committee hearing is in recess. We'll send out a notification, and all of you have a good evening. Thank you.